Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to talk about the fact that Marvel may have just revealed the official timeline. Now, the book, of course, does not come out until late October, but on Amazon's website, so publicly available information, you know I don't get into leaks and rumors and all that. You can check out on Amazon yourself if you want. There have been some preview pages for quite a while, actually, but today they dropped a few more, and they don't directly reveal the timeline, but if you do a little bit of work, then you can figure it out. So this is kind of fun. I mean, I guess if you want to be completely surprised by the book, then don't watch this video because we're going to talk about what it inadvertently revealed. But again, this is not rumors, not leaks. It's all out there on the web. So anyway, I think you'll find this fascinating if you decide to watch it. So let's dive right in and see what we can find out. So I am running a contest all of September. All you have to do to enter is to be a subscriber, leave a comment, and the winner is chosen at random and announced in October. And the winner will get to choose from one of these 3 books, including the Timeline book. So yay. Best of luck to everyone. Okay, so like I said, there have been some pages out there for a while. Now, I haven't really talked about them because they had draft on them, but I think at this point, they're probably not going to change. So we'll first talk about the things that have been out there for a while, and then we'll talk about the stuff that dropped today. Okay, so we learned that Iron Man is in 2008. That's been a big question. Did they go with 2008, 2009, or 2010? I had guessed 2009, and we'll talk a little bit more about why, but nonetheless, the answer is 2008. I'm fine with that. They're saying it starts in early spring, early 2008, as you can see in the lower left-hand corner. And they're saying that it ends in spring of 2008. That's also interesting because for the longest time, they said the movie spanned like 9 months. But obviously not. They've shortened it up, and that probably makes more sense. I've never been able to figure out how they made it span 9 months, to be honest. But anyway, so there you go. Iron Man begins and ends in 2008. Okay? What else do we learn? Well, the Hulk preview page tells us a lot. We learned that he first became the Hulk in the mid-2000s, that Fury's big week, which includes Iron Man 2, Incredible Hulk, and Thor, that's in 2010. That was a big question. We learned that Avengers in 2012, but that's no surprise, right? We knew that. We learned that Age of Ultron's in 2015, Ragnarok's in 2017, and Infinity War is in 2018. Again, no surprises there. And then continuing around the circle, we learned that Endgame is in 2023, because that's the end of the blip, no surprise. That Shang Chi is in 2024, but they don't tell us much more, although we will learn a lot more soon. But that was no surprise. And then this was interesting, that She-Hulk actually starts in 2024, that's earlier than I thought, but then goes into 2025. And again, we'll learn a lot more about that. Okay, so these preview pages have been out there for a while. There's another one on Age of Ultron that's really cool. You can check that out if you want, but we didn't really learn anything new from that one. Okay, so what's the new stuff? So they gave us 2 things, the table of contents and the index. Actually, there's a few more pages. Go check them out. They look beautiful. This is going to be such an awesome book. But the real information ends up being on the table of contents and the index. Now, at first you would say, well, there's not much here, right? I mean, sure, we see that Iron Man's in 2008, but we already knew that. We see Hulk is in 2010. We already knew that. The real question was Phase 4. What was going on in Phase 4? And as you can tell, they don't really tell us much here, at least in the table of contents. I mean, we do see a reference to vibranium, which is probably Wakanda Forever. So looks like that's in 2025, but they're not telling us much there. And then it looks like there's a separate section on What If, which makes sense. On the Disney Plus timeline, they have it right after Loki. So, what seems to be 2023. But I like the fact they kind of pulled it out and made a separate multiversal section. So that's great. That works. Okay, so table of contents didn't tell us a lot. What about the index? Well, that's the real gold mine. Okay, so the index does a couple things. Number one, they get really detailed on the specific pages for each year. But again, you still say, okay, so what, right? What does that tell me? Well, then, if you look at characters that are also in the index, that tells you what pages they're found on, and you can link that up to these years, and we're going to get our timeline. Well, first of all, I do want to talk about this. This is an interesting section. Number one, it has a typo, which I hope they fix, because it shouldn't say 325. It should say that it goes 206 to 209. So that's interesting. But it looks like there's an entire section during the blip, because there's a separate section for 2023. So that's cool. It's only going to be about 4 pages, but I am really interested to see what they have there. They'll probably talk about, people like Hawkeye. We're going to see Sharon Carter is going to show up there in a moment. So yeah, very, very cool. That's going to be a great section. But okay, let's start looking at some of these movies and how this is going to work. So if we look at Obadiah Stane, for example, notice he's featured on page 71 and 73, and that fits perfectly with 2008, because that's what we've learned now, right? That it's in 2008, and that's in that range. I'm kind of interested in anything after page 73, right? He's dead. So I have no idea what they're going to be talking about there. But anyway, most importantly is, yes, this kind of confirms what we already knew, that Iron Man is in 2008. All right, looking at Malekith, the villain from Thor, we can see that it's in 2013 because pages 101 to 104. In fact, it looks like it's the first half of 2013. Okay, well, here's the first surprise. If we look at Maya Hansen, who we know is in Iron Man 3, her pages are after Malekith's. So it looks like they went with 2013 for Iron Man 3. Ugh. I don't like that one. I'll talk more about why I don't like it in a minute, but for now, sure looks like Iron Man 3 is in 2013. Oof. All right, I'm going to jump just to Ant-Man briefly to show Cassie Lang. Obviously, that's when she was a kid, and it looks like the first Ant-Man, therefore, is taking place in 2015. No surprise, although it's the last page. Notice 149 is when Yellow Jacket would have attacked her. I'm wondering if they're going to go with that October date. And if they do, that would push her birthday into October because that was around the time of her birthday. So that's interesting. We'll see what happens there. Anyway, Mobius. The reason I'm including Mobius is just to show that it looks like Loki is going to be discussed, his series, during the portion of 2023, probably after Endgame and that big battle. So, okay. In fact, remember, we saw What If was in a later section way at the back. So that's interesting. But anyway, so Loki is going to be discussed in 2023. The Darkhold, if we look at page 243, that's clearly WandaVision when she was looking at the Darkhold. So that would show that WandaVision's entry is going to be after Loki. So, okay, cool. All right, here we go into 2024. Boy, oh boy, it's going to get interesting. All right, the Death Dealer. I chose him because he's obviously in Shang Chi. And it looks like that is pretty much the first entry because Shang-Chi's, which I'm not including here, but his starts on page 244. So we'll talk more about the fact that I think I got this one wrong. And I'm fine. I kind of like it better in March and April, but it does look like this being the first entry is probably March and April because if we look at Sharon Carter, notice the biggest part of her entry is after the Shang-Chi entry. And of course, she appeared in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So that seems to place Falcon and the Winter Soldier after Shang-Chi. Also, this is kind of interesting. Notice she does have an entry on page 208. And that's where I was saying, she might show up during the blip section. Because during the 2020s, which is page 206 to 209, she's going to be featured. So I love that. We're going to learn what everybody's doing during the blip, I hope. But so it looks like for 2024, we start with Shang-Chi, and then we move on to Falcon and Winter Soldier. I'm including this because there's been a lot of discussion about whether Ao's appearance was before or after T'Challa's death in Wakanda Forever. It looks like she appears after the first appearance of Sharon Carter, because notice Sharon Carter is 251, 253, then Ao is on 254, 255. So that makes sense. She appeared, well into the series. And then if we look at Ramonda, she's on page 255. So that would be after Ao appeared in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And I'm so happy that's how they did it, because my theory was, and I think a lot of people's theory was, Ao showed up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier before T'Challa's death. So, very cool. We learned that. Love it. All right, then we move to Far From Home. And we know when that's pretty much specifically placed because of Quentin Beck, right? So that, notice it moves to page 258 from 255. So after the flashback of T'Challa's death, we move on to Far From Home. Okay, and so next we have, boy, this one's interesting, right? Ajax. So, and page 268, so happening basically right after the entry for Far From Home, which that goes with the theory I've had for a while that it was in fall of 2024. It looks like that's what they're going with. And I cover in detail in a video why I believe that's where Eternals is. But yeah, it looks like that's where they're placing it. So, okay, very interesting. Then we have No Way Home. And so we see Ned Leeds picking up basically after Ajax, page 271. We see now Ned Leeds really heavily involved, 275 all the way up to 286. So that looks like No Way Home. Then we have America Chavez, who we know, of course, was in Multiverse of Madness. So there had been some question about whether Multiverse of Madness was still going to be in 2024. Some people have said it might be early 2025. Nope, looks like 2024, because notice her final appearance on 293 is basically the last entry, which that kind of surprised me, actually, because of Hawkeye. In fact, let's move on to that for a second. Kate Bishop, notice, she also... her last appearance is on 293. So I'm not sure what America Chavez is doing on page 293. That's interesting. Is she maybe meeting with Kate Bishop? Oh, wouldn't that be interesting? Young Avengers. But yeah, it does look like Multiverse of Madness takes place before Hawkeye, which is no surprise, right? Okay, so that is 2024. Now, let's move on to 2025. All right, so the first entry for 2025 is Moon Knight. We know that because Arthur Harrow. Notice the page numbers 296 to 301. So that's the first entry because clearly Moon Knight has a couple pages before that. But so there's Moon Knight, which I believe is probably in April of 2025. Then we have Thor: Love and Thunder. And boy, does that one have a complex timeline. So we're going to break this into a couple pieces. So this entry is for when I believe Jane had her blood test. Because notice page 301, it's immediately following the end of Moon Knight, and I believe Moon Knight ends in April. Remember, Jane had that blood test. A blood vial was dated, actually, April 30th. So this appearance, page 301, is her blood test. Okay. Then we moved to Nakia. So you chose Nakia because we know that this later appearance would be during Wakanda Forever. Notice it's picking right up there. So it looks like the next entry is Wakanda Forever. Then after that is the other more complex timeline entry, and that's She-Hulk. So I'm going to break this into a couple pieces. First of all, looks like something's happening from 267 to 68. I think that is actually when she and Bruce have the accident, and it's a little earlier than I expected. Because if you look at where that would line up over with 2024 events, that's around the time of the end of Far From Home. Interesting. So we're talking July, maybe August, but clearly earlier than I thought. Okay, then this is probably when they finish their training because notice it's the first entry in 2025. And I've always had the impression that the training probably ended around January or February of 2025. So my guess is the series hasn't really started yet. This is all the flashback, but very interesting. Okay, then the main series is happening. Notice it picks up right after Wakanda Forever because Wakanda Forever is on page 307 and then She-Hulk picks up. So that's why I've always felt She-Hulk starts in May for the main part of the series. Okay, great. Then we have Ms. Marvel. Looks like Ms. Marvel picks up right after She-Hulk, right? Page 313 to 318. So because I believe She-Hulk ends around, August timeframe, maybe early September potentially, but August timeframe, that fits perfectly for when I thought Ms. Marvel was, which is in September. Then we have the main battle and the main fights in Thor: Love and Thunder. So it looks like that is going to be an October timeframe because notice it picks up right after Ms. Marvel ends. Interesting. We're going to talk more about that when we get to some summary information. But yeah, it looks like Love and Thunder's main portion of the movie is in October. Okay. Then we have Werewolf by Night. Notice Werewolf by Night picks up immediately after that. And it is, I believe, when I've always thought, which is Halloween of 2025. Then finally, we have Guardians Holiday Special. I just chose Drax because he was a main character in that, obviously. Notice he has the last page in the 2025 section. So I think, therefore, Werewolf by Night is Halloween of 2025, and then Guardians Holiday Special is Christmas of 2025. There you go. That looks like all the book is going to cover. I never expected it to cover Phase 5, and it looks like it won't. So at least we do get all the way up to the end of Phase 4, which is great. Wow. Okay, so now let's look at the timeline that I've put together and see what I got wrong and needs to change versus what I got right. Okay, so this is what I had for phase one, a little bit of phase two. What do we know changed? Well, Iron Man. I mean, it was a guess, right? You could go either way with Iron Man, whether you go with 2008 or 2009, but they went with 2008, and it looks like 2008 to only May, so February to May, so that changed. And, let's revisit this. The reason I don't like this, but it is what it is it seemed really clear that Iron Man 2 picked up 6 months after Iron Man 1. And in particular, not just did we get this graphic, but even the lines. We all know why we're here. In the last 6 months, Anthony Stark has created a sword of untold possibilities. So, for what it's worth, that's why I chose it. However, I do like their placement because Vision in Civil War, which is in 2016, clearly said, in the 8 years since Mr. Stark announced himself as Iron Man. Well, the only way to make that work is if Iron Man's in 2008. So, it works with Civil War. It just doesn't work with Fury's big week in Iron Man 2. But I also think one of the reasons Feige did this is he really wanted the MCU to start in 2008, not 2009. I mean, sure, it got retconned to 2009, but this way he can say, hey, it started 2008 when the movie came out. So, okay, that works. That's fine. What's the next change? Well, Iron Man 3. Remember? It moved to 2013. Oof. I don't like that. A couple reasons I don't like it. Number one, because in the movie, there was a 1999 scene, New Year's Eve of 1999, and then they all said 13 years ago. 13 years ago. So 1999 plus 13 is 2012. So it flows better. It makes more sense to me. However, it is true that there is a very, very, very visible newspaper, which if we zoom in a little bit, you can see 2013. So clearly that's what they went with. But I'll tell you, one of the issues is, and not everybody's an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan. I know that. Some people think it's not canon anymore. Well, you may have got your wish if that's what you want, because this really messes up Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because the first season, when it started, Iron Man 3 had already happened, and then Thor happened. So this really hoses Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So I don't know what to do with that. I'm sorry for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans. If you got some ideas, I'm open to it. I mean, I'm still going to call it canon until Marvel says it's officially not, but this is about as official as you can get. So, okay, those are the only two changes to the timeline for Phase 1 and Phase 2. The rest of Phase 2 and Phase 3, actually, really no changes. These have never been that controversial. Perhaps Doctor Strange's range of months might change, and perhaps Ant-Man's might. We'll have to see if they get that detailed. But anyway, for the most part, I don't see the years certainly changing anything here. All right, what about Phase 4? That's been the big controversial one, right? Well, right off the bat, I trusted Disney Plus too much, and I just don't think it made sense this close to the blip. But nonetheless, Shang Chi, July 2024, new. May to April of 2024. Now, I do like the fact that that makes it actually happen during the Qingming Festival. That is way better. But there was so much international travel in this movie. I mean, they were all over the place. And I just don't think when all the craziness was happening during the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, remember, the world was a hot mess. It just doesn't seem like they could hop on a plane and fly all over. But maybe they were chartered flights. It's all good. I like this better, to be honest, so I'm totally good with that. But you got to wonder, is Disney Plus going to fix the timeline? Now, I know a lot of people love to diss on the Disney Plus timeline. This is the only thing I think they're going to have to change. They just need to flip these two, and they're done. So whether you like or you hate the Disney Plus timeline, apparently it is correct. Other than this is wrong. But otherwise, it is correct. Very interesting. All right, so what else changed? Well, Thor Love and Thunder certainly changed. I'm not going to change what I have here because the movie does really run from February to October. But I guess what we learned from the timeline book is that the majority of the movie is in October. And I had guessed the majority was in May. And that just it was a retelling of the movie by Korg in October. But yeah, the majority of the movie is in October. However, that still works with She-Hulk referencing Lady Thor, because if we look at the movie, really there is a very clear line that places it in October, because Thor asked Jane, when did you find out about your cancer? And Jane says, like 6 months ago. Well, it appears what Marvel has done is said that 6 months is 6 months after she took her blood test, if you remember, where they really gave us that date very clearly. So 6 months from April 30th would be sometime in October, early November. So the reason that the Lady Thor line still works is she went to New Asgard right after this blood test. It just means she was in New Asgard for, several months before Thor came along. So, okay, it all works. It works. It wasn't what maybe we expected, although I originally had it in October and I moved it. But anyway, nonetheless, this is why Marvel did what they did. So the only other thing that changed, we learned, is She-Hulk actually starts in 2024, but those are flashbacks. And in this case, well, in fact, in all cases, like Wakanda Forever, I'm putting it where the main movie is, not the flashbacks. The flashbacks I handle separately. So really, She-Hulk still is from May to August of 2025 with flashbacks in 2024 and leading into the beginning of 2025. So there you go. For the most part, Phase 4 is intact. And again, the Disney Plus timeline was right. Crazy, huh? Also, Phase 5, like I said, that's really not in the timeline book, so we don't know if this is right or not, but I mean, it looks like it, because if they're not including these in there, I would think that's because they're in 2026. Okay. All right. Don't forget, we do have the contest. All you have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment, and we'll announce the winner in October. And then I always like to mention we do have a Discord server, and you can see here we're talking about the timeline book, of course, right? What else would we be talking about? I will leave a pinned comment, and you can join the server if you'd like. We'd love to have you part of the conversation. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.